Let's turn our attention back to Washington, D.C. It is day number 8 of the government shutdown and some high tension, high tense moments there on Capitol Hill. A pair of interaction, confrontations, you might say, finger pointing, shouting, debating on the just hallways there of Capitol Hill that involved Hakeem Jeffries, Mike Lawler, Speaker Mike Johnson. Let's take you out to some of these brief moments from earlier today.
Right now.
Ask you a question. Did
Why don't we sign
you
on
get
right
permission
now?
from your boss?
Why don't we sign on right now?
Did your boss, Donald Trump?
You can easily extend the ACA
did your
right
boss,
now.
Donald Trump,
He's
give
not
you
my
permission?
boss.
Yes, he is.
No, he's not. And by the way,
So let me ask you a
why
question.
did you vote to shut the government down? Why did you vote to shut it down?
Let me ask you a question.
For years, you always lectured about how we need to keep the government open.
You're making a show of this to
no,
make
it's
yourself
sad.
relevant.
It's sad. You could easily sign on to
You're
this.
embarrassing yourself
You could
right
sign
now.
on to this. The only
You're
embarrassment here is
clout.
you.
You're an
You
embarrassment.
could sign on to the bill.
Let me ask you a question.
You have 4 Democrats on here. Why won't you sign on to it?
Let me ask you a question.
It's a clean extension for 1 year.
You voted for the one big
Clean
ugly bill,
extension.
correct?
I voted for a tax cut bill that gave the largest tax cut to Americans in history, including, by the way, the average New Yorker getting a $4,000 tax cut. Are you against that?
You're embarrassing
yourself. Do you want
right
to cut the standard deduction in half?
The
Is that
largest
what you
cut
wanted
to
to do?
Medicaid in
No,
American
we rooted
history.
out
You voted
waste,
for that.
fraud, and abuse, by the way.
You voted
Tom DiNapoli, the
for a
Democratic
permanent-
controller of New
Let
York,
me ask you a question.
pointed out that $1.2 billion were wasted.
Listen, you're not going to talk. You're not going to talk to me.
Wasted
You're not
on
going to talk to me
fraud
and talk
and
over
non-New
me
York residents
because you don't
getting
want to
paid.
hear what I have to say.
Oh, I'm listening.
So why
Go
don't you
ahead.
just keep your mouth shut?
Oh,
because you
is
showed up.
Is that the way to
you
talk?
You showed up.
Yeah.
And so you voted for this one
I
big
signed
ugly
on
bill.
to this. You can extend it right
A
now.
permanent extension of massive tax breaks for your billionaire donors.
So 90% of Americans.
So they can get a permanent extension.
90% of Americans take the standard deduction.
Is that right?
90% of Americans take the standard deduction.
Is that right?
If you had your way, the standard deduction would have been cut in half. That would have been a massive tax increase on Americans all across the country.
You're
You support
here,
that?
unfortunately.
You're against lifting the cap on salt.
Of your billionaire donors.
The billionaire donors lifting the cap on salt. We put a income cap in place.
Why are you here right now?
An income cap. Didn't you want all Republicans to be here? I'm here.
Where are the rest of your Republican
You wanted Republicans to be here. I'm here.
All right, some high tense moments there in the hallway of Capitol Hill, and that was not the only very public display between House Republicans, House Democrats, as Cami Mondo notes that it was very loud in the House today. Johnson got into it with the senators from Arizona, Mark Kelly, Gallego, Lawler confronted Jeffries outside of his presser, now yelling on the House floor about Dems not getting recognized again. Let's bring in right now Cami Mondo covering Congress for Deseret News. Cami, thank you so much for joining us here. And obviously you witnessed some of these confrontations taking place. What were the opening? What were they over? And what was it all about?
And it seems just very rare when you actually see these altercations take place in hallways, especially ones that last so long and ones that involve, top members of the party. It's definitely not something that anyone really expected to happen today, especially not so many of them, and they each kind of started with, one member wanting to go up to the other, and that one we just saw with Jeffries, Mike Lawler. Jeffries is actually holding a press conference in that studio. And then when he came out, Mike Lawler was waiting for him to kind of, confront him on these ACA tax subsidies. And so in each moment that you've seen today with these interactions, it's just been like lawmakers really, tensions are running high on the Hill right now, especially with the House being out and each side blaming the other. So I think you're just finally seeing that come to a boiling point in real time.
And what can come of this? Because obviously we talk about the pressure on both sides to make a deal. People are working without pay right now. Or these conversations, these altercations, they happen behind closed doors typically right now, correct?
Right. So normally what you're seeing behind closed doors talks that right now I've been told are stalled on pretty much every end. So what you're seeing right now, especially on the House side, which that's the side that's been out for about 3 weeks now, they haven't been, doing much movement on this CR because they already passed it. They don't have to do any votes. So yeah, these very public altercations, it's kind of a question of, what do they gain from this? You're just seeing both sides really dig their heels in. Although Mike Lawler has already gone to the point where he's fundraising off of these videos and the altercations, saying that House Republicans are in town and they're ready to fight. So that's something that you'll probably see more of in the coming days, of people using this for political purposes rather than actual negotiations.
And let's talk about the interaction we haven't really seen, but obviously was very public, with Speaker Mike Johnson. He was confronted by two senators, so obviously chamber to chamber there, also across party lines. How much pressure is on Mike Johnson at this point? Because they have not been in session. He sent a lot of members home. Is there additional pressure on him, and what is his mindset right now?
Right, you're actually seeing Mike Johnson get a lot of flack from some of the Democrats in the Senate. Before that interaction, Senator Gallego told a few of us on the Senate side that he's actually putting a lot of the blame on Johnson himself. He's saying that a lot of the talks and negotiations that could be going on right now between Republicans and Democrats are being stunted because Johnson won't bring the House back in, and is basically saying, pass what we have or do nothing. And so then Gallego and Mark Kelly went to Speaker Johnson's office to try to talk to reporters, and that's when we saw Mike Johnson come out. So actually, Mike Johnson, even though he has nothing to do with the Senate, he's getting a lot of flack from that side from Democrats, basically blaming him for the shutdown.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And of course, also earlier this week, we heard from President Trump saying the negotiations potentially ongoing. Hakeem Jeffries say he hasn't heard from them since last week, since their meeting inside of the Oval Office. Is Trump involved in any of this at this moment?
It seems like Republicans are kind of struggling with the unified message on that. We did see Trump say there were negotiations, but then Mike Johnson and John Thune both said that those negotiations won't happen until the government is reopened. And so, you have Jeffries and Schumer saying they haven't heard from the White House since that initial meeting. And so I don't think Trump is really talking to Democrats at this point. I think there are conversations going on with Republican leaders in Congress, but both Johnson and Thune are standing strong in the fact that they will not negotiate until the government is reopened.
Yeah, it's interesting just to see these very out in the public, very real debates, confrontations, conversations taking place before our eyes as we're on day number 8 of this federal government shutdown. No end in sight. Cami Mondo, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. You're reporting here on Live Now. All right, thank you so much. All right, great conversation as always, kind of diving into the latest, and that's not a moment you typically see there in the hallways on Capitol Hill. We're hearing from Mike Lawler as he confronted earlier on the House Minority Leader, Mike Lawler, saying after not being allowed into Hakeem Jeffries' press conference, I confronted him as why he voted no on a clean TR to keep the government open for the American people and refuses to engage in bipartisan negotiations to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credit. So obviously following it all here on Live Now from Fox, some 7 days, 17 hours into the shutdown. We're following it here on Live Now from Fox. We're back after this.